Sup you beautiful people, hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Naruto Was Neglected by All His Peers. He was meant to be the Hokage, the beacon of hope. But what if Naruto's earliest days were marked not by camaraderie, but by crushing isolation? This isn't just a story about a different Naruto. It's about a Konoha that broke its own hero, and the profound, dark implications that ripple through a shinobi world without its guiding light. If you guys enjoy this What If, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other What Ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So now let's start this video. The Academy graduation exam loomed like a storm cloud over the final week of classes, its approach marked by increased tension among students and instructors alike. For most of Naruto's classmates, the prospect represented either triumph or devastation, the culmination of years of training and the gateway to their dreams of becoming shinobi. For Naruto himself, it represented something far more complex, the most delicate performance of controlled failure he had yet attempted. From his customary position in the back corner of the classroom, he watched his fellow students engage in last-minute cramming sessions and nervous strategy discussions. The air hummed with anxiety and determination, punctuated by whispered conversations about technique refinement and theoretical review. Even the most confident students showed signs of stress. Sasuke's jaw was tighter than usual, Sakura's note-taking had become obsessive, and even Shikamaru seemed marginally more alert during lectures. "Remember," Iruka was saying from the front of the room, his voice carrying the weight of genuine concern for his students' futures. The graduation exam consists of 3 components: written examination, demonstration of basic techniques, and the practical application test. You'll need to pass all 3 sections to receive your forehead protector. Naruto made careful notes in his well-worn notebook, documenting not just the official requirements, but the subtle details that revealed the exam's true nature. The written portion would test theoretical knowledge, strategy, history, basic sciences related to chakra manipulation. The technique demonstration required competent execution of the Academy 3. Transformation, substitution, and clone jutsu. The practical application involved a scenario-based challenge that would test decision-making under pressure. Simple enough, he thought, his pen moving across the page in neat, precise strokes that would have surprised anyone who glimpsed his handwriting. The question isn't whether I can pass, it's how badly I need to fail to maintain credibility while still advancing. The mathematics were delicate. Fail too completely, and he risked genuine retention in the academy for another year, which would complicate his long-term plans significantly. Fail too little, and someone might begin to question the consistency of his incompetence. The sweet spot lay in achieving just enough competency to scrape through, while reinforcing the perception that his success was more luck than skill. "Naruto," Iruka called suddenly, his voice cutting through the classroom chatter. "Could you demonstrate the transformation technique for the class?" Every head turned toward the back of the room, and for a moment Naruto felt the unfamiliar sensation of being the center of attention. It was disconcerting after months of carefully cultivated invisibility, like suddenly finding himself under a spotlight he hadn't noticed being installed. "Interesting," he noted even as he rose from his desk. "Iruka's subconscious awareness of me seems to be increasing as the graduation approaches. Possible stress response or external influence." He moved to the front of the classroom with carefully calculated reluctance, his posture suggesting nervous uncertainty rather than the fluid confidence that hours of private practice had developed. Around him, his classmates watched with expressions ranging from mild curiosity to barely concealed contempt. Sasuke's eyes held particular disdain, as if Naruto's very presence was an insult to the serious nature of their training. "Take your time," Iruka encouraged, though there was a note of doubt in his voice that suggested he expected disappointment. "Remember to focus your chakra and maintain the image clearly in your mind." Naruto nodded, forming the hand seals with deliberate imprecision. His movements were technically correct, but lacked the smooth flow that characterized truly skilled practitioners. To the casual observer, he appeared to be struggling with muscle memory and concentration, exactly the impression he intended to create. "Transform," he declared, channeling chakra in carefully calculated waves. The technique activated but not cleanly. Instead of a perfect replication of his chosen target, Iruka himself, the transformation produced a slightly distorted version with asymmetrical features and color variations that suggested poor chakra control. It was the sort of mistake that dedicated students made when they understood the theory but lacked the practical experience to execute it properly. Perfect, Naruto thought while maintaining his expression of frustrated concentration. Competent enough to demonstrate basic understanding, flawed enough to reinforce perceptions of limited ability. Good effort, Uruka said, though his tone carried more encouragement than genuine praise. You're showing improvement, but remember to maintain steady chakra flow throughout the entire technique. Practice will help with consistency. Naruto released the transformation and returned to his seat, ignoring the mix of suppressed snickers and dismissive glances from his classmates. The performance had achieved its objectives, demonstrating minimal competency while reinforcing his established reputation for struggling with basic techniques. As the final week progressed, Naruto continued his careful balancing act during review sessions and practice examinations. He scored precisely at the boundary between passing and failing on written tests, showing just enough knowledge to suggest he had been paying attention without revealing the depth of his understanding. His technique demonstrations improved marginally, enough to indicate effort and growth, not enough to suggest hidden talent. Meanwhile, his shadow clones continued their covert intelligence gathering throughout the village. The information they provided painted an increasingly complex picture of the forces operating beneath Konoha's surface. Political tensions between clan factions, economic pressures from recent mission distributions, personnel changes in Anbu that suggested preparation for some significant operation. All data that would prove valuable in understanding the larger context of his situation. On the night before graduation, Naruto made his way to his secret training ground for what might be his final session before the exam. The abandoned clearing had become his sanctuary over the past months, the one place where he could drop his carefully maintained facade and explore his true capabilities without fear of observation. Shadow Clone Jutsu, the technique activated flawlessly, filling the clearing with dozens of perfect duplicates. Each clone possessed his full knowledge and abilities, creating an instant training army that could accomplish more in a single evening than most students managed in weeks of conventional practice. Final review, Naruto commanded, and the clones immediately began systematic demonstrations of every technique in his repertoire. What he had achieved in secret would have staggered his academy instructors. His mastery of the Shadow Clone Jutsu far exceeded anything typically seen outside the ranks of elite Jonin. His transformation techniques were so precise they could fool even Sharingan-enhanced perception. His substitution speed approached the level of actual teleportation, and his understanding of chakra manipulation encompassed principles that wouldn't normally be taught until Chunin rank or beyond. All of this hidden, he reflected, as he watched his clones execute complex training exercises with mechanical precision. All of this wasted, because revealing it would create complications I'm not prepared to handle. The graduation exam began at dawn, with written testing in the academy's main classroom. Naruto took his usual seat in the back corner and carefully reviewed his strategy one final time. The questions would test general knowledge about shinobi techniques, village history, and basic tactical theory, subjects he had mastered through his unauthorized access to the academy's archives. As test papers were distributed, he noted the tension radiating from his classmates. Sakura's confident posture suggested she had prepared thoroughly, while Hinata's nervous fidgeting indicated anxiety despite her obvious competence. Sasuke approached the exam with characteristic arrogance, his expression suggesting he considered it beneath his notice. Different approaches, same underlying pressure, Naruto observed while reviewing the first section of questions. They're all performing for approval, while I'm performing to avoid it. The written examination covered exactly the topics he had expected, with difficulty levels ranging from basic academy curriculum to slightly more advanced concepts that separated dedicated students from casual participants. Naruto worked through the questions with careful deliberation, answering just enough correctly to pass while including strategic errors that would reinforce his mediocre academic reputation. When the practical demonstration phase began, students were called individually to perform the Academy 3 techniques before a panel of instructors. Naruto waited in the designated area outside the examination room, listening to the muffled sounds of each student's performance. Some emerged with obvious satisfaction, others with barely concealed disappointment. Sasuke's demonstration lasted longer than most, and when he emerged, his expression held the subtle satisfaction of someone who had exceeded expectations. Sakura's session was brief but successful, her relief evident in her posture as she collected her belongings. Hinata's attempt took considerably longer, though she eventually appeared with a small smile that suggested success despite her initial nervousness. "Uzumaki Naruto," called the proctor from the doorway. "Time for the performance of a lifetime," Naruto thought as he entered the examination room. The space was formally arranged, with 3 Chunin instructors seated behind a long table facing a designated demonstration area. Uruka occupied the center position, flanked by 2 unfamiliar examiners whose chakra signatures suggested above-average competence. All 3 watched him with expressions of professional neutrality, though Naruto detected subtle signs of lowered expectations in their body language. "Please state your name for the record," requested the examiner on Uruka's left. "Uzumaki Naruto," he replied clearly, his voice carrying just enough nervous energy to suggest appropriate exam anxiety. "You will demonstrate the 3 basic techniques in the following order: transformation, substitution, and clone jutsu. Take your time and focus on proper execution rather than speed." "Interesting phrasing," Naruto noted. "They're already adjusting expectations downward, probably based on my academy performance records." He began with the transformation technique, forming the hand seals with the same deliberately imperfect precision he had used during classroom demonstrations. The resulting transformation into Uruka was technically successful, but included subtle flaws, slightly asymmetrical features, minor color variations, clothing details that weren't quite accurate. It was the sort of performance that suggested basic competency hampered by insufficient practice and poor chakra control. "Acceptable," the center examiner noted, making marks on his evaluation form. "Proceed to substitution technique." For this demonstration, Naruto moved to the designated target area and performed the technique using a practice log as his replacement object. The execution was competent but unremarkable, fast enough to qualify as successful, not so fast as to suggest exceptional ability. He managed the substitution smoothly, but without the fluid grace that characterized true mastery. "Adequate," the same examiner recorded. "Final technique, clone jutsu." "Here we go," Naruto thought, suppressing a smile as he prepared for the most crucial performance of his academy career. The clone jutsu was where his deliberate failure needed to be most convincing. This was the technique where his natural advantages, massive chakra reserves, perfect control, and months of secret practice could most easily betray his true capabilities. Creating a single, stable clone would be trivially easy for someone of his actual skill level, but it would also shatter the carefully constructed facade he had maintained for months. Instead, he channeled chakra in carefully modulated waves, creating artificial instabilities that would produce exactly the sort of failure expected from someone with his reputation. The technique activated, chakra swirled, and a pale, sickly clone materialized beside him, its form flickering like a candle in a strong wind. The duplicate was recognizably him, but obviously unstable, its outline wavering as inadequate chakra struggled to maintain cohesion. Within seconds, it collapsed back into dispersed energy, leaving only wisps of chakra residue as evidence of its brief existence. Perfect failure, Naruto thought with satisfaction even as he allowed disappointment to color his expression. Demonstrates basic understanding while confirming perceived limitations. The examiners exchanged glances, their expressions mixing sympathy with professional resignation. This was clearly not the first time they had witnessed a marginal student struggle with the final technique. "Uzumaki," Uruka said gently, his voice carrying the tone of someone delivering disappointing news to a child. "The clone technique requires more practice. I'm afraid—" "Wait," interrupted the examiner on the right, raising one hand. "Let me review his scores from the other sections." Naruto waited with carefully controlled breathing as the 3 instructors conferred in hushed tones. His written examination had been calculated to achieve exactly 70%, competent enough to pass, unremarkable enough to avoid attention. His transformation and substitution demonstrations had been similarly calibrated to suggest minimal competency rather than hidden talent. The overall evaluation shows passing grades in 2 of 3 practical areas, the right-hand examiner announced after several minutes of discussion. Combined with acceptable written examination scores, this constitutes borderline qualification for advancement. "They're actually going to pass me," Naruto realized with carefully concealed excitement. The mathematics worked out perfectly. "However," Uruka continued, his expression serious, "promotion to Genin rank requires demonstrated competency in all basic techniques. I'm afraid we'll need to see a successful clone jutsu before, Sensei, Naruto interrupted, allowing desperation to creep into his voice. Please, just one more chance. I've been practicing every day, and I know I can do better. The plea was calculated to appeal to Uruka's sympathetic nature while maintaining the impression of someone whose abilities were limited by dedication rather than talent. Around the room, the other examiners shifted uncomfortably, their body language suggesting they were witnessing exactly the sort of borderline case that made evaluation decisions difficult. Very well, Uruka said after another brief consultation with his colleagues. One additional attempt, but understand that this is exceptional consideration. Normally, a failed demonstration would result in immediate disqualification. Naruto nodded gratefully, taking a moment to center himself while planning his next performance. This second attempt needed to show improvement while still maintaining credible limitations. Success, but barely. Competence, but nothing that would suggest hidden depths. He formed the hand seals again, this time with slightly better precision that suggested he was drawing on reserves of concentration brought out by desperation. The chakra flow was more stable, though still imperfect, and when the technique activated, a solid clone materialized beside him. It wasn't perfect. The clone's coloring was slightly off, its posture less confident than his own, and there were minor details in its clothing that suggested imprecise chakra molding. But it was undeniably stable, maintaining its form for the full 30 seconds required by Academy standards before Naruto allowed it to disperse naturally. The examination room fell silent as the three instructors processed what they had witnessed. Here was clear evidence of improvement under pressure, the sort of borderline success that characterized students who possessed just enough talent and determination to meet minimum standards. Acceptable, the center examiner announced, though his tone suggested surprise at the successful outcome. Congratulations, Uzumaki. You have passed the graduation examination. Uruka rose from his position and approached with a forehead protector bearing the leaf symbol of Konoha. Naruto, he said, his voice warm with genuine pride, you've worked hard for this moment. Wear this with honor, and remember that becoming a genin is just the beginning of your journey as a shinobi. As the metal headband settled across his forehead, Naruto felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride at having successfully manipulated the examination process, satisfaction at achieving advancement while maintaining his cover, and underneath it all, a strange hollow feeling at the necessity of hiding his true capabilities. Step 1 complete, he thought as he bowed respectfully to the examination panel. Now comes the real challenge, maintaining this facade while operating as part of a genin team. The graduation ceremony that afternoon was a formal affair, with successful students receiving their forehead protectors before an audience of families and academy staff. Naruto sat in his assigned seat and watched as his classmates were recognized for their achievements, each name called with appropriate ceremony and applause. When his own name was announced, the applause was polite but subdued, the sort of response reserved for unexpected successes rather than celebrated achievements. He noticed that several families in the audience seemed surprised to see him among the graduates, their expressions mixing confusion with mild concern about the academy's standards. Exactly the reaction I was hoping for, he noted with satisfaction. Minimal expectations leading to minimal attention. Following the ceremony, graduates gathered in small groups to celebrate with their families and discuss their hopes for team assignments. Naruto observed these interactions from his customary position on the periphery, noting the complex dynamics of pride, anxiety, and anticipation that characterized each family unit. Sasuke stood alone, as expected, his isolation self-imposed rather than circumstantial. Several adults approached him with respectful congratulations, but he accepted their praise with minimal acknowledgement, his attention clearly focused on future challenges rather than present achievements. Sakura was surrounded by her parents and several family friends, their excitement and pride evident in their animated conversations about her academic success and technical proficiency. Her achievement was genuine and well-earned, despite the psychological limitations that would likely hamper her future development. Hinata's celebration was more subdued, with her father offering formal congratulations that carried undertones of expectation and pressure. The Hyuga clan's standards were notoriously high, and even graduation from the academy represented only the first hurdle in a lifetime of demanding expectations. For Naruto, there was no family gathering, no celebration dinner, no proud relatives to share in his achievement. He collected his gear and made his way home to his small apartment, where the silence that greeted him was familiar rather than lonely. Solitude had become his natural state, and the absence of external validation had taught him to find satisfaction in personal accomplishment rather than social recognition. That evening, as he prepared for the team assignment announcements scheduled for the following morning, Naruto reflected on the day's events and their implications for his future plans. Graduation represented both an ending and a beginning, the conclusion of his academy deception and the start of an even more complex performance as a member of a three-person genin team. Tomorrow, the real work begins, he thought as he reviewed his notes from months of observation and intelligence gathering. Time to discover who my teammates will be and what challenges that will present for maintaining my cover. The team assignments would determine not just his immediate future, but the entire trajectory of his development as a shinobi. Everything he had worked for, every careful deception he had maintained, every skill he had developed in secret, all of it would be tested by the dynamics of working closely with other people for the first time in his life. As sleep finally claimed him, Naruto's last conscious thought was a quiet acknowledgement of the irony inherent in his situation. He had graduated from the academy by failing just enough to succeed, had achieved his goals by hiding his true capabilities, and had earned the right to become a shinobi by proving he was barely qualified for the role. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new deceptions, and new opportunities to demonstrate that the most dangerous enemies were always the ones nobody saw coming. The academy had taught him the basic techniques every shinobi needed to know. But life had taught him something far more valuable: how to be invisible in plain sight, how to manipulate perception through controlled failure, and how to turn weakness into strength through the simple expedient of making people underestimate him completely. The graduation exam was over. The real education was about to begin. Team assignments were announced at precisely 9 o'clock the following morning, with academy graduates filing into classroom 3B for what would be their final gathering as students. The atmosphere crackled with nervous energy and barely contained excitement as 36 newly minted genin waited to learn their fates. Conversations buzzed throughout the room as students speculated about potential teammates and discussed their hopes for particular jonin instructors. Naruto occupied his familiar position in the back corner, observing the social dynamics with the detached fascination that had become his trademark. The invisible barrier that separated him from his classmates remained as impermeable as ever, even in this moment of shared anticipation. While others clustered in animated groups, he sat alone with his thoughts and his notebook, documenting the final data points from his academy experience. Interesting how stress amplifies existing behavior patterns, he noted, watching Sakura pace nervously near the front of the classroom. She's seeking proximity to Sasuke even while claiming to focus on team assignments. Indeed, most of his female classmates had positioned themselves where they could maintain visual contact with the Uchiha heir, their body language revealing hopes that had little to do with optimal team composition. Sasuke himself sat in stoic isolation, his expression suggesting that team assignments were merely an inconvenience to be endured rather than an opportunity for growth and cooperation. They still don't understand what they're really signing up for, Naruto reflected as he studied the faces around him. They think graduation means they've become shinobi, but they're still just children playing dress-up in a profession that kills the unprepared. Uruka entered the classroom carrying a clipboard and wearing the expression of someone about to deliver news that would fundamentally alter the trajectories of dozens of young lives. The conversations immediately died as all attention focused on the Chunin instructor, whose presence commanded respect even from the most rebellious students. "Congratulations again on your graduation," Uruka began, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "Today marks the beginning of your true journey as shinobi of Konoha. The team assignments I'm about to announce will determine not just your immediate future, but potentially the entire course of your careers." He paused, allowing the weight of those words to settle over the assembled graduates. Several students shifted uncomfortably, the magnitude of the moment finally registering despite their excitement. Teams have been carefully balanced based on individual strengths, weaknesses, and psychological compatibility assessments conducted throughout your academy training. Remember that your teammates are not just colleagues, they are brothers and sisters who will share your dangers, support your growth, and depend on your loyalty in life-or-death situations. Standard motivational speech, Naruto noted, though he detected genuine emotion in Uruka's delivery. But the team assignments are really about political balance and resource allocation. clan representation, power distribution, legacy considerations. Team 1, Uruka announced, consulting his clipboard. Aburame Shino, Inuzuka Kiba, and Hyuga Hinata. Your Jonin instructor will be Yuhei Kurenai. The named students acknowledged their assignments with varying degrees of satisfaction. Kiba looked pleased, probably anticipating that his aggressive personality would mesh well with Hinata's gentleness and Shino's analytical nature. Hinata appeared nervous but resigned, while Shino gave no outward reaction whatsoever. Tracking and reconnaissance team, Naruto analyzed. Kurenai specializes in genjutsu, which complements their sensory capabilities, probably intended for intelligence gathering and surveillance missions. Team 7, Uruka continued, his voice carrying a subtle note of uncertainty. Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, and Uzumaki Naruto. Your Jonin instructor will be Hokage Kakashi. The announcement hit the classroom like a physical blow. Sakura's gasp of delight was audible even from the back of the room, while several other girls shot her looks of pure envy. Sasuke's expression didn't change, but Naruto caught the almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes that suggested displeasure with the team composition. Fascinating, Naruto thought, processing the implications of this unexpected development. They've placed the dead last with the Rookie of the Year and the top academic performer. Either someone has a sense of humor, or there are factors at play that I haven't accounted for. Team 8, Uruka's voice continued, but Naruto's attention had already shifted to analyzing his new situation. Being assigned to Team 7 represented both opportunity and danger. Opportunity to observe high-level training and techniques up close. Danger that extended interaction with teammates might expose inconsistencies in his carefully maintained facade. Hokage Kakashi, he mused, reviewing everything he had learned about the copy ninja through months of covert observation. Elite Jonin, former Anbu, student of the 4th Hokage. Possesses the Sharingan despite not being Uchiha-born, known for high standards and unconventional training methods. The legendary Jonin's reputation preceded him throughout the village. Stories of his prowess circulated among younger shinobi like folklore. The man who had copied over 1,000 jutsu, the former Anbu captain who had completed missions that others considered impossible, the teacher who had failed every genin team assigned to him for the past several years. That last detail is particularly interesting, Naruto noted. If Kakashi has a perfect failure rate with student teams, why would they assign him to train the Uchiha heir? Unless the implications were subtle but significant. If Kakashi had been specifically selected to train Sasuke, then Team 7's real purpose was the development of the Uchiha's abilities, with other team members serving as supporting elements in that primary objective, which would make Naruto's presence even more of an afterthought than usual. As the team assignments concluded and students began separating into their new groups, Naruto remained in his corner seat and observed the emerging dynamics. Team 7 had claimed a section near the middle of the classroom, with Sakura practically vibrating with excitement while Sasuke maintained his characteristic aloofness. I can't believe we're on the same team, Sasuke-kun, Sakura gushed, her voice pitched high with emotion. This is like a dream come true. We're going to be the best team in our entire class. Sasuke's response was a grunt that could have meant anything or nothing. His attention seemed focused on something beyond the classroom walls, as if he was already mentally preparing for challenges that his teammates couldn't yet imagine. Classic avoidance behavior, Naruto diagnosed from his position of invisible observation. He views the team assignment as an obstacle to his personal goals rather than an opportunity for collaborative growth. Neither of his new teammates seemed to notice that their third member had yet to join their impromptu gathering. Sakura's attention was entirely absorbed by Sasuke's proximity, while Sasuke himself appeared to be systematically ignoring everyone in the room. The fact that Naruto remained seated in his corner, technically part of their team but practically invisible, seemed to escape their awareness entirely. Already establishing the dynamic, Naruto noted with clinical interest. I'm going to be the forgotten third wheel on a team primarily designed around Sasuke's development and Sakura's emotional investment in him. The morning passed slowly as teams waited for their respective Jonin instructors to collect them. Some sensei arrived promptly. Kurenai appeared within minutes of the assignments being announced, greeting her new students with warm professionalism. Others took longer, leaving their teams to speculate about delays and first impressions. Team 7 waited and waited. By noon, most other teams had departed with their instructors, leaving the classroom increasingly empty. Sakura's initial excitement had given way to frustrated concern, while Sasuke's expression had darkened into barely concealed irritation. Even Iruka had left, offering apologetic reassurances about Kakashi's notorious tardiness before departing for his own duties. "This is ridiculous," Sakura muttered, checking the classroom clock for the dozenth time. "What kind of jonin keeps his team waiting for 3 hours? We should report this to the Hokage." Sasuke's response was characteristically terse. Chen. From his corner, Naruto continued his observations while maintaining his facade of patient waiting. The delay was actually providing valuable intelligence about his new teammates' psychological profiles under stress. Sakura's frustration was making her increasingly animated, her anger overriding her usual attempts to appear composed for Sasuke's benefit. The Uchiha heir's irritation was more subtle but equally telling. He was accustomed to being the center of attention and priority, and Kakashi's casual dismissal of punctuality was clearly grating against his sense of importance. "Kakashi's testing them already," Naruto realized as the pattern became clear. This isn't just tardiness, it's a deliberate evaluation of how they handle unexpected circumstances and authority figures who don't meet their expectations. At 12:47 p.m., nearly 4 hours after the scheduled meeting time, the classroom door finally slid open to reveal a tall figure with gravity-defying silver hair and a black mask covering the lower half of his face. Hokage Kakashi entered with casual indifference, his visible eyes scanning the room with apparent surprise at finding students still waiting. "Oh, hello there," he said, his voice carrying a tone of mild bewilderment. "You must be my new Genin team. Sorry I'm late, I got lost on the road of life." The excuse was so patently ridiculous that even Sakura seemed momentarily speechless. Sasuke's glare could have melted steel, while Kakashi appeared completely oblivious to the tension his arrival had created. "Interesting technique," Naruto observed. "He's immediately establishing himself as unpredictable and potentially unreliable, which will force the team to adapt to uncertainty rather than depending on structured expectations." "Meet me on the roof in 5 minutes, Kakashi continued, already turning to leave. "We need to have a little chat about what it means to be part of Team 7. As the Jonin disappeared as quickly as he had arrived, Sakura exploded into outraged commentary about unprofessional behavior and disrespect for students' time. Sasuke rose from his seat with controlled fury, his movements sharp with barely contained aggression. Neither seemed to register that their third teammate had silently followed them toward the staircase leading to the academy roof. "And so it begins," Naruto thought as he trailed behind his new companions. "Time to see how long I can maintain invisibility within a 3-person team structure." The academy roof provided a panoramic view of Konoha, its traditional architecture blending seamlessly with the natural beauty of the surrounding forest. Kakashi had positioned himself near the edge of the building, his posture relaxed despite the obvious tension radiating from his waiting students. "Right then," the Jonin said once all 3 Genin had assembled. "Let's start with introductions. Tell me your name, your likes and dislikes, your dreams for the future, and your hobbies." "Why don't you go first?" he pointed at Sakura, who straightened with obvious determination to make a good impression despite her earlier frustration. "I'm Haruno Sakura," she began, her voice carrying forced cheer. "I like." Her gaze flickered toward Sasuke and a blush spread across her cheeks. "I dislike Inopig, my dream is to." Another glance at Sasuke, this time accompanied by an almost predatory smile. "My hobby is completely fixated," Naruto noted as Sakura's introduction devolved into romantic fantasy. She can't even complete basic self-introduction without referencing her obsession. "Interesting," Kakashi commented dryly. Next, Sasuke's introduction was characteristically brief and intense. "My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I don't particularly like anything, and I dislike most things. I have no dreams, only ambitions. I will restore my clan and kill a certain man." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud, their implications clear to anyone familiar with the Uchiha massacre. Kakashi's visible eyes studied Sasuke with increased interest, clearly recognizing the depth of trauma and determination that drove the young ninja's motivations. "Revenge fantasy dominating rational thought," Naruto analyzed. "He's defined himself entirely by his relationship to Itachi, which means he has no independent identity or goals." "And you?" Kakashi said, his attention shifting to. The Jonin's gaze swept across the rooftop, his expression showing mild confusion as he appeared to count the assembled team members. For a moment, his eye paused in Naruto's direction, but then continued scanning, as if looking for someone who should have been present but wasn't. Fascinating, Naruto thought, watching the same perceptual skip that had affected every other authority figure in his life. Even someone of Kakashi's caliber isn't immune to whatever technique is creating my invisibility. Sensei, Sakura said uncertainly, aren't you going to ask Naruto to introduce himself? Kakashi blinked, his visible eye focusing with apparent effort on the spot where Naruto stood. It was as if the Jonin had to consciously remind himself that a third team member existed, fighting against some mental block that wanted to dismiss his presence entirely. Right, Kakashi said slowly, his tone suggesting confusion about why he had overlooked someone standing directly in front of him. Your introduction. Naruto stepped forward slightly, ensuring he remained within Kakashi's direct line of sight. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, he began, his voice carrying the right note of nervous excitement expected from a fresh academy graduate. I like ramen and training. I dislike people who judge others without understanding them. My dream is to become Hokage someday so people will acknowledge me. The words were carefully crafted to reinforce perceptions of naive ambition and desperate need for approval. Nothing in the introduction suggested hidden depths or capabilities beyond those of an average academy graduate with unrealistic goals. Perfect balance of hopeful determination and obvious self-delusion, he noted with satisfaction. Exactly what people expect from someone like me. Hokage huh? Kakashi's response carried a note of gentle condescension. Well, that's ambitious. Now then, since we've all introduced ourselves, let's discuss what comes next. The Jonin reached into his equipment pouch and produced 2 bells, each attached to a short length of string. The metal caught the afternoon sunlight, gleaming with deceptive innocence despite the implications of their presence. Tomorrow at dawn, we'll meet at Training Ground 3 for your real graduation test, Kakashi announced, his casual tone belying the significance of his words. These bells will determine whether you truly become Genin or get sent back to the academy for additional training. What do you mean, real graduation test? Sakura demanded, her voice sharp with indignation. We already graduated, we earned our forehead protectors. Ah, well, you see, Kakashi explained with obvious amusement, the academy graduation was just a preliminary screening. The real test comes from your Jonin instructor, and I have to tell you, my standards are considerably higher than the academy's. Of course they are, Naruto thought, already analyzing the strategic implications of the bell test. 2 bells for 3 students, creating artificial scarcity that will test interpersonal dynamics under pressure. What's the pass rate for this test? Sasuke asked, his voice carrying cold calculation. Oh, roughly 66%, Kakashi replied cheerfully. Of course, that's for teams in general. My personal pass rate is, well, let's just say you'd be my first successful team if you manage to pass. The revelation hit Sakura like a physical blow, while Sasuke's expression darkened further. Neither seemed to notice that their third teammate had remained silent throughout this exchange, his apparent lack of reaction fitting perfectly with perceptions of his limited intelligence and ambition. 0% pass rate, Naruto corrected mentally. He's specifically selected to fail student teams, which means this test serves some purpose beyond simple evaluation. I suggest you skip breakfast tomorrow, Kakashi continued, clearly enjoying his students' discomfort. You'll probably just throw it up. Oh, and don't bother bringing weapons, they won't help you against me. With that encouraging advice, the Jonin disappeared in a swirl of leaves, leaving his new team alone on the rooftop with their thoughts and growing anxiety about the following day's challenge. This is impossible, Sakura exclaimed as soon as Kakashi was gone. How are we supposed to pass a test that no one has ever passed before? And what kind of sensei tells his students they're probably going to fail? Sasuke's response was typically self-centered. I'll pass, I have to. His gaze turned toward the village below, his expression carrying the weight of clan expectations and personal vengeance. I won't let anything stop me from getting stronger. Neither teammate seemed to expect any response from Naruto, and he was content to maintain that dynamic. Instead, he observed their reactions with clinical interest, noting how stress revealed the fundamental aspects of their personalities. Sakura's outrage masked deeper insecurities about her capabilities, while Sasuke's confidence was undermined by his desperate need to succeed at any cost. Tomorrow will be illuminating, he thought as his teammates eventually departed for their respective homes. Time to see how this test is really designed to work, and what Kakashi's true objectives might be. That evening, Naruto made his way to his secret training ground for what might be his final night of completely unrestricted practice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and closer scrutiny, potentially limiting his opportunities for covert skill development. Shadow Clone Jutsu, the familiar technique, filled the clearing with dozens of perfect duplicates, each one representing capabilities that far exceeded anything his teammates or instructor suspected. As the clones began their training routines, Naruto reflected on the day's developments and their implications for his long-term plans. Being assigned to Team 7 represented both opportunity and complication. On one hand, training under Hokage Kakashi would provide access to high-level techniques and strategic knowledge that could accelerate his development significantly. On the other hand, close cooperation with teammates would make it increasingly difficult to maintain his facade of mediocrity without raising suspicions. The real question, he mused as he watched his clones practice advanced jutsu sequences, is whether Kakashi's perceptual blindness regarding my existence will persist under close examination, or if extended exposure will allow him to overcome whatever technique is creating the effect. The bell test itself was clearly designed to evaluate teamwork and cooperation under pressure. 2 bells for 3 students created an artificial scarcity that would force difficult decisions about priorities and sacrifice. Most teams would likely devolve into competition, fighting each other for limited resources rather than working together to overcome the challenge. Which is probably the point, Naruto realized. The test isn't about individual capability, it's about understanding that the mission and the team take precedence over personal advancement. As his clones continued their training exercises, Naruto began formulating strategies for the following day's test. The challenge would be contributing meaningfully to the team's success while maintaining his reputation for limited ability. Too little involvement, and he might actually fail along with his teammates. Too much, and someone might begin questioning how the dead last had developed such effective tactical thinking. Controlled competence, he decided. Support the team's success without claiming credit for the strategy. Let Sasuke think he's leading while actually guiding the team toward the correct approach. The plan would require precise execution and careful timing, but it offered the best balance between achieving the test's objectives and preserving his cover identity. If successful, he would advance to full Genin status while reinforcing perceptions of his role as a lucky follower rather than a strategic thinker. As midnight approached and his clones completed their final exercises, Naruto allowed himself a moment of anticipation for the challenges ahead. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new phase in his development, one that would test not just his combat abilities, but his skills in long-term deception and identity management. The academy taught me the basics, he thought as he made his way back toward the village. But real education comes from surviving in the field with people who have the power to expose or protect your secrets. Kakashi represented the first genuine test of his invisibility technique against a truly elite opponent. If the copy ninja could be fooled by the same perceptual gaps that had affected everyone else in his life, then Naruto's condition was even more powerful than he had suspected. If not, well, that would bring complications of an entirely different sort. Either way, tomorrow would provide answers to questions that had been building for months. The bell test would determine not just whether Team 7 would be allowed to continue as Genin, but whether Naruto's carefully constructed facade could survive close scrutiny from one of the village's most skilled and experienced jonin. Time to find out, he thought with quiet satisfaction, just how invisible I really am. Dawn arrived at Training Ground 3 with the pale light of early morning filtering through the forest canopy, casting long shadows across the practice area that would serve as the stage for Team 7's real graduation test. The training ground was a study in controlled wilderness, carefully maintained to provide realistic combat conditions while remaining safe enough for instruction. Ancient trees towered overhead, their branches creating natural obstacles and concealment points, while a small stream meandered through the clearing to provide water sources and additional tactical complications. Naruto arrived precisely 15 minutes early, having spent the pre-dawn hours conducting reconnaissance of the area from concealed positions. His investigation had revealed several key details about the testing environment. 3 primary approach routes, multiple escape paths, optimal positions for observation and ambush, and most importantly, the subtle traces of chakra that indicated Kakashi had been present earlier to set up surveillance and possibly traps. Professional thoroughness, he noted with approval as he settled into his designated waiting position. He's taking this test seriously despite his casual attitude yesterday. From his spot near the edge of the clearing, Naruto observed his teammates' arrivals with clinical interest. Sasuke appeared exactly on time, his movements sharp and controlled despite obvious signs of a sleepless night spent in preparation. The Uchiha heir had clearly taken Kakashi's warnings to heart, approaching the test with the same grim determination he applied to all aspects of his training. Sakura arrived 3 minutes late, her usual immaculate appearance slightly disheveled in ways that suggested hasty preparation and nervous energy. She had obviously struggled with Kakashi's contradictory advice about skipping breakfast, her pale complexion indicating she had followed his suggestion despite her better judgment. Interesting psychological profiles under stress, Naruto observed as he pretended to fidget nervously while actually cataloging his teammates' conditions. Sasuke channeling anxiety into focused preparation, Sakura allowing worry to undermine her decision-making processes. At precisely 7 o'clock, exactly 3 hours after the designated meeting time, Kakashi materialized in the center of the clearing with his characteristic casual indifference to punctuality. His appearance was unchanged from the previous day, right down to the orange book tucked into his vest pocket, though Naruto's enhanced senses detected the subtle signs of recent activity that suggested the Jonin had been conducting his own preparations. "Morning, everyone," Kakashi said cheerfully, as if keeping students waiting was the most natural thing in the world. "Ready for your test? You're late again," Sakura exploded, her stress and hunger combining to fuel her outrage. "What kind of teacher shows up 3 hours late to his own exam?" Sasuke's response was more controlled but equally pointed. "If this is how you approach important evaluations, I question whether you're qualified to train anyone." Neither teammate seemed to register that Naruto hadn't joined their complaints, his apparent acceptance of the delay fitting perfectly with perceptions of his resigned mediocrity. In reality, he was using the time to conduct final observations of the testing environment and Kakashi's behavior patterns. Deliberate psychological pressure, he analyzed. Creating frustration and fatigue before the actual test begins. Standard technique for evaluating performance under adverse conditions. "Right, well, complaints noted," Kakashi replied with obvious amusement. "Here's how this works." The Jonin reached into his equipment pouch and produced the 2 bells from the previous day, their metallic surface catching the morning sunlight. He attached them to his belt with casual efficiency, their gentle chiming serving as an audible reminder of the challenge ahead. "Your objective is simple, get these bells before noon. Anyone who fails goes back to the academy." Kakashi's tone remained cheerful despite the threatening implications of his words. "Oh, and you'd better come at me with intent to kill, or you'll never succeed." Standard misdirection, Naruto noted as he watched his teammates process this information. The real test isn't about individual success, it's about understanding that teamwork supersedes personal achievement. "But there are only 2 bells, Sakura pointed out, her analytical mind immediately identifying the mathematical problem. "What happens to whoever doesn't get one? They get tied to those posts over there," Kakashi explained, gesturing toward 3 wooden training posts positioned at strategic intervals around the clearing, and get to watch the others eat lunch while they go hungry. "Artificial scarcity creating competitive pressure," Naruto observed. "Designed to test whether we'll work together or fight each other for limited resources." "Now then," Kakashi continued, pulling out a small alarm clock and setting it on a nearby stump, "you have exactly 3 hours. Begin." The word had barely left his lips when Sasuke and Sakura scattered in opposite directions, their academy training taking over as they sought concealment and tactical positioning. Within seconds, both had vanished into the forest surrounding the clearing, leaving only rustling leaves to mark their passage. Naruto remained exactly where he was. It wasn't strategic positioning or tactical thinking, at least not from Kakashi's perspective. To the observing Jonin, Naruto's failure to immediately seek cover looked like the classic mistake of an inexperienced genin, someone too slow or too confused to react appropriately to the start signal. In reality, Naruto's choice to remain visible was calculated with mathematical precision. By positioning himself as the obvious target, he would draw Kakashi's attention while his teammates maneuvered into advantageous positions. More importantly, his apparent incompetence would reinforce perceptions of his limited capabilities, while allowing him to observe the Jonin's techniques at close range. Sometimes the best hiding place is in plain sight, he thought as Kakashi approached with casual confidence. "Not going to hide?" the Jonin asked, his visible eye studying Naruto with what appeared to be mild curiosity mixed with disappointment. Naruto stammered, allowing nervous uncertainty to color his voice. "I thought maybe I could talk to you." Ask you to go easy on us since we're just academy graduates. Perfect performance of naive hope, he noted with satisfaction as Kakashi's expression shifted to barely concealed condescension. I'm afraid that's not how it works, Kakashi replied gently. You'll need to earn those bells through skill and determination, not conversation. But what if, Naruto began, then deliberately cut himself off as if realizing mid-sentence that his approach was hopeless. Never mind, I guess I should try to fight you. Excellent, he thought as he formed the hand seals for what appeared to be a basic clone technique. Now let's see how you handle obvious incompetence. Clone jutsu, he declared, channeling chakra with carefully calculated instability. The technique activated, but the result was precisely the sort of failure that had characterized his academy performance. Instead of solid clones, the jutsu produced two pale, flickering images that wavered like mirages in desert heat. They lasted approximately 5 seconds before dissolving back into dispersed chakra, leaving Naruto standing alone and apparently defenseless. Perfect controlled failure, he noted with internal satisfaction while allowing disappointment to show on his face. Kakashi sighed, the sound carrying genuine regret. I see the academy's standards haven't improved. This is exactly why most genin teams fail their first real test. Without further ceremony, the jonin moved. To most observers, Kakashi's attack would have been almost invisible, a blur of motion that ended with Naruto suddenly airborne, spinning helplessly before crashing into a nearby tree with bone-jarring impact. The technique was called the 1,000 Years of Death, a supposedly comedic jutsu that was actually quite effective at disabling inexperienced opponents through shock and disorientation. Naruto's performance of being caught completely off guard was Academy Award worthy. He groaned convincingly as he peeled himself away from the tree trunk, his movements suggesting genuine pain and confusion rather than the calculated positioning he was actually employing. Interesting technique, he observed while maintaining his facade of stunned incompetence. Minimal chakra expenditure for maximum psychological impact. Efficient use of surprise and superior positioning. Maybe you should stay down, Kakashi suggested, though his tone was more sympathetic than mocking. This test isn't really designed for someone at your skill level. And there it is, Naruto thought as he struggled to his feet with theatrical difficulty. Even during combat evaluation, the perceptual blindness persists. He genuinely believes I'm as incompetent as I appear. From his position sprawled against the tree, Naruto had an excellent view of the forest where his teammates were presumably implementing their own strategies. Subtle movements in the foliage indicated that both Sasuke and Sakura were repositioning, probably planning coordinated attacks while Kakashi was distracted by dealing with their apparently hopeless third member. Good, he noted with satisfaction. My role as obvious target is serving its purpose. I won't give up, he declared with convincing determination, pushing himself upright despite his apparent injuries. I'm going to become Hokage someday, and Hokages never surrender. Perfect blend of admirable persistence and naive delusion, he analyzed as Kakashi's expression softened slightly. Reinforces perceptions of earnest incompetence while maintaining sympathy. The next phase of the test proceeded according to predictable patterns. Sasuke attempted a direct assault from concealment, his superior taijutsu skills allowing him to press Kakashi briefly before being overwhelmed by the Jonin's experience and superior technique. Sakura tried to coordinate with her teammate, but found herself outmatched by the speed and complexity of their instructor's responses. Throughout these engagements, Naruto remained on the periphery, making token efforts to contribute while actually conducting detailed analysis of all participants' capabilities. Every technique Kakashi demonstrated was memorized for later study, every tactical decision cataloged for future reference, every weakness exposed filed away for potential exploitation. Fascinating combat philosophy, he observed as Kakashi effortlessly countered Sasuke's most advanced attacks. He's not trying to win decisively, he's testing their responses to different types of pressure and adversity. As the morning progressed, the pattern became increasingly clear. Despite their individual competence, Team 7 was failing the test because they were approaching it as 3 separate competitions rather than a single collaborative challenge. Sasuke fought for personal glory, Sakura supported Sasuke rather than the team objective, and Naruto. Well, from everyone else's perspective, Naruto was just getting in the way. Time for the next phase, he decided as the alarm clock showed they had less than an hour remaining. His opportunity came when Kakashi had successfully trapped both his teammates, Sasuke buried up to his neck in earth courtesy of a Doton technique, Sakura caught in a genjutsu that left her unconscious against a tree. With his primary threats neutralized, the Jonin's attention shifted to dealing with their remaining teammate. "I have to give you credit for persistence," Kakashi said as he approached Naruto's position. "Most students would have given up by now." "I told you," Naruto replied with stubborn determination, "I'm going to be Hokage. That means I can't quit, no matter how hopeless things look." Perfect setup, he thought while preparing for the most crucial performance of the entire test. What happened next required precise timing and flawless execution. As Kakashi moved to disable him with another casual technique, Naruto deliberately stumbled backward, his accidental fall positioning him exactly where he needed to be for what appeared to be a complete coincidence. His flailing hand struck a tripwire that Kakashi had set earlier as part of the training grounds preparation. The resulting explosion of smoke and debris created a momentary distraction, not enough to seriously inconvenience an elite Jonin, but sufficient to mask the subtle movements that allowed Naruto to implement his real strategy. Now he thought as chaos erupted around the clearing. Using the concealment provided by the smoke, Naruto activated techniques that would have staggered his observers if they had been able to perceive them clearly. Shadow clones, not the pale failures of his public performances, but perfect duplicates capable of independent action, moved through the disrupted environment with surgical precision. One clone freed Sasuke from his Earth prison, making it appear as though the Uchiha had broken free through his own efforts. Another dispelled the genjutsu affecting Sakura, positioning the recovery to look like natural awakening rather than external intervention. A third clone positioned itself to create the tactical opportunity that would allow the team to implement a coordinated strategy. All of this happened within the span of 10 seconds, completed before the smoke had fully cleared and Kakashi's attention had refocused on the situation. Invisible support, Naruto noted with satisfaction as his teammates began to regroup. Exactly what the team needs without drawing attention to how they're getting it. "What happened?" Sakura asked as she shook off the lingering effects of the genjutsu, her voice confused but increasingly alert. "I broke free," Sasuke replied grimly, his pride intact despite the obvious impossibility of escaping unaided from Kakashi's Earth technique. "We need to work together if we're going to have any chance of success." Finally, Naruto thought as he watched understanding dawn on his teammates' faces. They're beginning to grasp the real nature of the test. The final phase of the examination showcased everything that Team 7 could accomplish when they functioned as an actual unit rather than competing individuals. Sasuke's combat skills provided direct engagement capabilities, Sakura's analytical mind contributed tactical coordination, and Naruto continued to appear completely useless while actually orchestrating the team's success through invisible contributions that no one noticed or attributed to him. When Sasuke needed an opening, Naruto's accidental positioning created distractions that allowed the Uchiha to capitalize on Kakashi's momentary attention shifts. When Sakura required information about their opponent's techniques, Naruto's bumbling movements somehow managed to trigger responses that revealed crucial data about the Jonin's capabilities. Perfect orchestration, he observed as the team's collaborative effort finally achieved meaningful results. They think they're succeeding through their own improved cooperation, never realizing how much invisible assistance they're receiving. The climax came with less than 5 minutes remaining on the clock. Through what appeared to be a combination of clever teamwork and fortunate timing, Team 7 managed to corner Kakashi in a position where he couldn't easily escape or counterattack. Sasuke held his attention from the front, Sakura threatened from the side, and Naruto tripped over his own feet and accidentally tackled their instructor from behind. It was the sort of slapstick failure that perfectly encapsulated his reputation for bumbling incompetence. Kakashi, caught off guard by the unexpected assault, stumbled forward just enough for Sasuke to snatch one of the bells from his belt. The other bell fell free during the confusion, allowing Sakura to secure it before Kakashi could recover his balance. "Time," called the alarm clock, its shrill ringing announcing the end of the test. Flawless execution, Naruto thought as he lay sprawled on the ground where his accidental tackle had left him. Success achieved through apparent failure, just as intended. Team 7 stood in the aftermath of their accomplishment, 2 bells claimed, and all 3 members breathing heavily from their exertions. The silence stretched for long moments as Kakashi studied his students with an unreadable expression. "Interesting," the Jonin finally said. "You actually managed to work together, that's unexpected." "So we pass?" Sakura asked, her voice cautious despite her obvious excitement. Kakashi's response was interrupted by the arrival of an Anbu operative, the masked figure appearing with the silent efficiency that characterized the village's elite forces. The operative's presence immediately shifted the atmosphere from test evaluation to official business. "Hokage-san," the Anbu said formally, "you're needed immediately. C-rank mission assignment for your team." "Interesting timing," Naruto noted as he observed the exchange. Either coincidental, or this test was deliberately scheduled to align with mission availability. "Right now?" Kakashi asked, his casual demeanor not quite hiding his surprise at the immediate deployment. "Bridge construction project in the Land of Waves. Client is waiting at the mission assignment desk. The Hokage wants your team briefed and departed by noon." Land of Waves, Naruto thought, recognizing the location from his extensive study of regional geography and political situations. Island nation with significant economic challenges and no native shinobi forces. Potentially complicated mission environment. As the Anbu departed and Kakashi began organizing for their immediate transition to mission status, Naruto reflected on the morning's events with quiet satisfaction. The Bell test had served multiple purposes beyond its official evaluation criteria. It had allowed him to analyze his teammates' capabilities under pressure, observe Kakashi's teaching methods and combat techniques, and most importantly, establish his role within the team dynamic. Invisible support specialist, he concluded, contributing to team success while maintaining facade of incompetent comedy relief. 30 minutes later, Team 7 found themselves in the Hokage Tower's mission assignment office, facing an elderly man whose appearance and attitude immediately set Naruto's analytical instincts on high alert. Tazuna was clearly more than he appeared. His calloused hands spoke of genuine construction experience, but his eyes held the wariness of someone accustomed to danger and deception. "So you're my protection detail," Tazuna said, his gaze sweeping across the three genin with obvious disappointment. "I was expecting something more impressive." Classic underestimation, Naruto noted as he observed the bridge builder's dismissive assessment. "He's evaluating us based on appearance and age rather than capabilities." "I assure you, these are capable shinobi," Hiruzen interjected from behind his desk, though Naruto detected subtle notes of uncertainty in the Hokage's voice. Team 7 has just successfully completed their graduation evaluation. Tazuna's attention focused on each team member in turn, his expression growing increasingly skeptical. When his gaze reached Naruto, the dismissal was almost palpable. Here was clearly the weakest link in an already dubious protection force. "Perfect," Naruto thought as he maintained his facade of nervous excitement. "Another person who will completely ignore my contributions to the mission's success." "This is a simple escort mission," Kakashi explained as the team prepared for immediate departure. "We'll accompany Tazuna to the Land of Waves, provide security during his travel, and ensure he reaches his destination safely." "Too simple," Naruto analyzed while nodding along with appropriate enthusiasm. C-rank mission parameters don't match the client's obvious anxiety levels or the rushed deployment schedule. As Team 7 gathered their equipment and prepared for what was officially a routine escort assignment, Naruto made final preparations for what his instincts warned would be anything but routine. The Land of Waves represented unknown territory with complex political and economic factors that could complicate any mission. Time to discover, he thought as they departed through Konoha's gates, just how much chaos one invisible genius can prevent through careful observation and strategic intervention. The mission to the Land of Waves was about to begin, and with it, the next test of whether Naruto's hidden capabilities could protect his teammates from dangers they didn't even know were coming. Behind them, the village of Konoha continued its daily routines, completely unaware that one of its most dangerous assets was walking away disguised as its most hopeless failure. The art of being nobody was about to face its greatest challenge yet. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.